And we're back in, ladies and gentlemen. I have, let me just make sure I've got you guys here. Ryan Daly, Matt Reagan, are you guys live with us here?
Hey Josh, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Matt. How are you?
Doing great. Ryan, you there?
I am now. I was on mute. Sorry about that. I was excited about the Cleveland wedge that I didn't get.
I was so upset that I can't win the prizes that I knew what the answers were if I come up with the question. So, guys, I'm going to hand the stage over to you for a few minutes. Really, really looking forward to hearing the presentation myself as we get back going, and I'm able to start programming at my own facility. I can't wait to hear your presentation, and thank you guys so much for joining us to support the Youth Summit.
Well, thanks so much, Josh, and thanks for everyone being on. It's been awesome to I've been able to plug in here a little bit this morning throughout meetings and hear some great presentations. And today in what we wanted to present on, Josh came up with an amazing title about getting youth on the right course. And really the objective of today, if we looked at the agenda, spend the first 10 minutes covering one section, the next 10 minutes covering kind of execution, and the third section, just we want to do as much Q&A as possible. But really, we want you to walk away today with maybe a greater appreciation to begin thinking long term for your juniors. So, inevitably, we've had some great presentations on how we cast a wider net and do a better job when we get folks to the facility to make it fun and motivating in their first experience with golf. But how do you answer that question, which is what's next, coach? Because we all should have what the what's next is. And hopefully by the end of the day, you'll have a greater appreciation for thinking long term, and also maybe just a framework to think within that will help you execute your programming. So the first section we're going to cover is how to have a long-term mindset, and we'll show you the three layers that we've always, that we never saw like when we first started, but the three layers that built over time that we saw you need to have in place to have a successful long-term program when you just look at the model itself. And then Ryan's going to cover, how to actually execute on a model like that. We're going to teach you kind of exactly how we set Operation 36 up, because just because you have the model doesn't mean you have like a clear and executable way to deliver on that, to actually deliver a program, right? So he's going to cover the 3 developmental program course. And then we'll just finish up where, Ryan and I are an open book and in what we do. And if we can help you with your programs this year, any questions is a great question, from business models to pricing to talking about juniors to how you deal with parents to how you keep someone in the program. So just be thinking of any of those questions and plug them in as you go throughout the process. That'd be really helpful for us. So at the end, we have something great to leak back on, and we'd love to have some good chats with folks here at the end. So, but just a quick background on Ryan and myself. We actually teamed up in 2010 at Keith Hills Golf Club in Boys Creek, North Carolina. And Ryan, I was thinking, we have kind of a special place in our heart for California, because that was when you and I in 2009 went out to California to the Titleist Performance Institute and started thinking. They're the ones that kind of tuned us into like starting to think a little bit more long-term for juniors with athlete development and everything. It's hard to believe that was over 11 years ago, Ryan.
It was. It was always good to get out there to get some warm weather. The depressing cabin fever that we were in.
Yes. Well, it's super rewarding to be able to chat with everybody today. And if you don't know who we are, what we did, back then, the basic impetus that Titleist Performance Institute kind of opened our eyes to, or what would happen if we could get juniors coming consistently throughout the entire golf season, just like every sport was doing, but doing that in a good way with good athlete development guidelines to follow. And we're going to talk about that here today, but then we're going to build on top of that and go more into the golf side of it as well. But our team and our mission has evolved over time. It started with just Ryan and I trying to launch a long-term junior golf development program together. And we got 3 kids to sign up. And then we have just been on this journey ever since of how do you keep someone engaged? How do you make it motivating and fun, not just in the day-to-day classes, but for the long term. And our mission today at Op 36 is designed just the number one long-term program and provide pros with that and technology to introduce and progress a beginner in playing the game of golf. And what started as juniors has evolved to adults as well, and thinking about how we can just create a better introduction to the game, and also how do we keep someone in the game. And if we feel, and we've seen, if you do this the right way, not only is it a win for the golfer who becomes a golfer and enjoys that experience, it's a win for the golf facility and the golf professional. And that's where, like, part of our heart, being golf professionals, and we have actually 8 PGA professionals on our staff, we want to raise the living standard of the golf professional as well. And if you do all these things and you set up long-term programs, they can be lucrative for you, your facility, and your players. So hopefully that can cast a little bit of a positive light from a business side as well of what developmental programming can bring to your table. And right now we help over 540 program locations that we call training facilities. And we have over 54,000 program participants over the last 3.5, almost 4 years now that we started really licensing the program to golf professionals. So but that's just a little background on us. And again, what we're going to do is dive into 2 sections here. Begin to think long-term. I'm going to go over the Op36 junior golf development model, and then we'll go right into how would you actually execute the program on that model. And Ryan, anything you think we should cover before we get started?
No, I think we're good to go. Good to go.
Excellent. All right. So when we start this saying begin thinking long-term, one thing we want you to kind of keep in mind or think about is look at your programming right now and think about, if someone says, hey, coach, what's the next step? Do you have a clear next step for them? Or do you know where to go? Or do you know the layers that you need to understand to really put something in place? And that's what brings us to what we would call kind of the Op36 junior golf development model layers, right? And there are multiple to this. And when people say that it's easy to do developmental programming, it's actually quite challenging. You have to be pretty well educated to have a good macro picture. And that's all I'm going to be talking about here is how do you think bigger and understand from point A to point B, how we take a lot of different skill levels and a lot of different types of people and a lot of different ages, and how do you progress them and build the best environment possible. And so if you see here, there's a little timeline here from ages 3 to 18. We're going to speak in terms of that today. And then as you go through, there's one layer to this puzzle is athlete development. It's doing the right thing at the right time, physically, socially, emotionally, for that player where they are in their journey. And that comes down to developmental age. You could have a 7-year-old that is developmentally a 9-year-old, and you can have a 7-year-old who's developmentally like a 6 or a 5-year-old. So you need to know where they fit in and understand how to work with specific players. And then we're going to go into golf skill development. You know, where does someone with their golf skill development fit into this model? So putting, chipping, pitching, wedges, irons, woods, how they're playing on the golf course. You need to know what type of skill level of the player you're working with to put them in the right environment. And then finally, kind of the foundation that we've learned throughout this whole experience is you have to create long-term motivation and enjoyment, long-term fun. You know, not only does it need to be fun in the day-to-day classes, but you have to start thinking about what kind of environment or foundation are you putting in that's going to increase motivation. You're going to help coach your players set goals, give them purpose, create more relatedness, more competence, and give them choices along the way. And so all of this all 3 of these layers play into one another, right? Without one, you're kind of missing out on a big component. And if you're a little bit more educated in these 3 layers, it helps to become a better coach and to set up better programming. So don't let it overwhelm you, but let's dive into all 3, and hopefully we can kind of show you how we package it together in our minds to help make sense of it. So let's first go into athlete development. Again, this is that physical, social, emotional well-being of your players. We all know that a 3-year-old is going to be different than a 10-year-old, and a 10-year-old is going to be different than a 16-year-old. I think we can all confidently say that. And there's lots of organizations, with the American Development Model, PGA.Coach has a great certificate. If you haven't done the PGA.Coach certification on athlete development guidelines, Titleist Performance 2, like they've had a junior golf development track. If you haven't done that, it's a phenomenal one as well. And then Canadian Sport for Life. If you haven't seen what they've been doing, Canada has been following a long-term athlete development model. They're kind of the pioneers of really assembling it. That they have some fantastic information on athlete development guidelines as well. And we're not going to go too far into this today, but just to kind of have a idea, this is kind of how ADM sets up their guidelines, right? And these really come back to that every single phase of development here is actually a different period of growth for a junior. And you need to be aware of that, right? When someone's going to hit puberty and they're going to grow a lot and their emotions are going to change. And when are they able to actually deal with competition and should be competing? All of those different mindsets that you need to kind of be able to think about in your head on if you're doing the right thing for your players. The athletic development models that are out there do a fantastic job helping you kind of have that big picture mentality, right? So from active start to, our end goal of all of this is if we can create enjoyment and do the right thing for players throughout this whole experience, hopefully whether they go out to the tour or we get them to play golf for life, it's going to be something that's enjoyable and impactful for them every step of the way. So then we go into, okay, let's go a layer deeper. This is the game of golf. So outside of the athlete development, right? We can start thinking about golf skill development. If you think someone from their first round ever, we believe that there should be a plan at every golf facility, and there can be, to take someone as far as they want in the sport. And that is a core belief of ours. And we need to think about this, and we need to embrace what would happen if you get someone to play golf and continue on their journey, right? And do you have that environment or programming in place to take them that far? And every dance studio, every gymnastics studio that you see on every corner of every city, of every town, they have a plan like this. Baseball, karate, all of them have a long-term plan. So getting down into the golf specific side of this, when Ryan and I started, we kind of had that vision, or TPI turned us onto that vision of like, how do you take someone all the way to become an Olympian, right? It's pretty cool that it golf's in the Olympics, or we can think about that now. But if you put kind of golf, if you put the golf skill development here on the left, and we thought about it in terms of handicap, right? So 54 handicap, 45, 35, 25 handicap, 15 handicap, 10, all the way down to a +5, let's say, where you potentially could be out there playing on tour. So when you look through the lens of that, and you also look over the ages, we can't forget that skill level or handicap, which we'll just do a side note here, ages 3 to 6, you shouldn't be really tracking any progress. There should be no keeping score. There should be no setting goals. It should all be relatedness, story-driven education, fundamental movement skills, dynamic activities. I think we know that, but like just going forward, let's just think forward on from 7 to 18, that this is really what we're diving into here, more 7 and up from here on out. But as you go through this, you're going to have players who sign up for your program, okay? And those players are going to come, and they could be of all ages. So you have 7, you have a 10-year-old, there might be a 15 handicap, you have a 7-year-old who's never played golf before. But then you got to get a 14-year-old that's never played golf before, but you have a 15-year-old who's a scratch golfer. So you have to take this into account when you're building a developmental golf program, to be able to have a clear understanding of where that player is in their journey. Because each of these players is going to have different motivations. They're going to have, different, the scratch golfer may not even want to be a competitive golfer. So we have to take all of this into account. But the main component here is just understanding that if you do have a way to kind of like model this stuff out, you can have this good, clear picture for your golf skill development plan moving forward for your players. And then the final component to all of this, as we said, is golf tracks, is player enjoyment, is just fun, right? So as we start to look through this and you start to go, well, why does this person play golf? Again, we had some great presentations earlier on, as you're bringing someone in, we have kind of that exploratory track that they come in. They all want to try out golf. Now, remember, they can come in at any age. So you might have someone at the age of 3 coming in at the exploratory. They're trying to try out golf. You might have someone at the age of 15. They're going to be different types of people. That's where the athlete development stuff comes into play, right? But you want to give them a great first experience in golf, and games and clinics and camps are a great way to do that. But then you have to start thinking about, well, again, what's the next step, right? And then usually they go from exploratory to, hey, I want to get comfortable playing the game of golf with others. And we call that the social track. So getting comfortable playing the game of golf on the golf course with others. And then the next one would be the recreational track. I want to be comfortable playing golf, and I care about improving my skills. These are folks that want to get better at the game. They want to see their skills develop. That's important to them. It's intrinsic. It's just them. It's not them versus others yet, right? It's just them personally wanting to master the sport and master their skills. And we call that the rec track. And then the next phase of this is, hey, I feel like my skills are good enough that I want to go test my skills against others, right? I want to play local tournaments, or I want to play high school golf, or I want to compete against others, right? And that's that next phase. And then finally, maybe potentially, you have some of your juniors that say, hey, I want to play in college. I want to play, and I want to win I want to win college golf events. And so they have a motivation to want to win tournaments, and they're competitors. And so when someone comes into the sport, we as coaches need to have a good understanding of what that pathway is that folks are moving through and the motivations behind them. And it's up to the player to make the choices to move up this track. And if you set your programs up in the right way, you're going to be able to accomplish this, because this is what it really kind of looks like. If we go to the kind of put this all together before we go into execution, usually someone comes in the exploratory track, they're testing out the sport, right? And then what our job as professionals should be is, okay, if they want to take that next step and they want to get comfortable playing the game of golf on the golf course, which can be fun and motivating if you set it up in the right way, they want to get comfortable playing golf with others. So how do we make them comfortable? How do we give them a course that's going to be scaled to their skill and make them feel competent right away? And then finally, the rec track, the recreational track, how do we get them up to there? And then how do we get them up to the competitive? And how do we get them up to collegiate, right? So giving them that plan so they always have that next step to maybe take that next step in their journey and start thinking long-term, okay? And then again, you can't forget that no matter where these folks fit in, that the athlete development guidelines are there based on their ages for their physical, emotional, and social development skills, that where they're at. Because you might have a kid that is a 3 handicap at the age of 9. How do you handle that within the right guidelines for them as human beings, right? We can't forget that. And so to kind of wrap up and turn over to Ryan, the Operation 36 golf program is really about taking someone from that exploratory track and turning them into a social golfer that's not afraid to play golf on the golf course and wants to go play golf on the golf course, and then get them continuing on their journey, right? And that's where our sweet spot and where we help folks is getting someone connected to playing the game of golf. So hopefully that gives you a good big picture. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it right over to Ryan. And you may be asking, okay, well, how do you actually execute a program like that? How do you have that big long-term vision with golf skills, with motivation built in for the long term, and with athlete development? And I'll turn it over to Ryan. He's going to cover the 3 developmental program cores and how we kind of execute the Operation 36 program at the locations that we're at.
Absolutely. So just to follow up, Matt, we want to share with you how to execute something similar to this in figuring out how to get the student to go through the right thing at the right time, at their choice and at their pace, right? And we've kind of mentioned that multiple times in this presentation. And we're going to show you our solution to this, because there's always been a problem. Like, these are great ideas and these are great concepts, but how do you actually execute? And Matt and I have been banging our heads against the wall for 12 years to try to figure this out. And this is just a solution. This isn't the solution. It's just a solution. And hopefully you get some ideas from this. And then at the end, we'll share with you, there's some free training that you could go through if you'd like to learn a little bit more about this. But we have learned that there are 3 cores, no matter what level a player is at, that they need to do these actions to become a competent golfer, whatever competent golfer means. As Matt mentioned, some people are just trying to become social golfers. Some people just want to be recreational golfers, and then some want to be competitive. All of them need to do these 3 fundamental actions we have found to get into their sweet spot, what they want to do in the sport of golf. So those 3 fundamental actions are, the first one is to, yes, play golf. So at some point we do want to get them to play golf. As Matt mentioned, 3 to 6-year-olds might be a little bit too young. However, we have seen some have a blast on the golf course, playing 1 hole, 2 hole, 3 holes with their parents. So playing golf, and that changes over time, right? As they get older, golf might look a little bit different than it did when they were 6 or 7. Learning and training skills, at some point, they're going to need help. They're going to raise their hand and say, how do I get better? And then finally, seeing progression. You know, how do you show them that they have gotten better, what they've done in the past, to continually motivate them? Because at some point, just in any sport you're in or any endeavor, you're trying to lose weight and get in shape, you kind of lose that motivation a little bit at some point, and looking back at some of your progress can certainly help you continue to be motivated to move along forward. So here's an interesting study that we're doing, is figuring out, you know, like there's a student there on the left, Bodie, age 7, like in the course of 12 months, what does it look like for him on playing, training, seeing progression on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis to reach their goals. So we're starting to zero in on what level of effort it takes to reach those tracks that Matt was talking about, the recreational, the competitive, which is really cool to have a conversation with a parent and have this data to back you up on what it takes. So I'm going to go over just three things. In the bottom left, the program core number one, which is the development league. We're going to share with you the 9-hole events that we recommend our coaches and facility use at their local course to develop golfers. And then group coaching classes is what we recommend for learning and training skills. Certainly there's some coaches that do this and they do it through private lessons, which is perfectly fine, but we have found a sweet spot with juniors just because they like to be in their peer group with others, the group coaching classes with a curriculum. So you know where you're going, the parents know where you're going, is super helpful for the student as they go along. And then finally, what we talked about a little bit, seeing progression, we do that through technology. We used to do that with 3-ring binders and Google spreadsheets. Actually, it was Excel spreadsheets, I think, back in the day. And now we have graduated in the last 6 years to a mobile app, iOS, Android, and web app, which is super powerful for students to see their progress, encourage them. And we're going to show you how we use that to have each facility compete as a group, as a community, to try to beat other facilities in playing and practicing. So we're going to share a few of those here. And Josh mentioned we got about 10 minutes left. So we'll close up here in a few minutes and then open it up for Q&A. So the first core is the Development League, playing on the golf course. And many of you may have seen this before. We have altered this since maybe a previous presentation, and we're always kind of working to try to get this better. But the OP36 development model, we're trying to give golfers a course where they can experience shooting par. What course or what playing field can they get on to experience success? Like you wouldn't put a 6-year-old on a 10-foot basketball hoop and a regulation basketball, right? You wouldn't potentially put a 7-year-old on a full-size baseball diamond with 90 feet in between each base. I mean, they'd be absolutely exhausted. So one of the problems that Matt and I were trying to solve when we created this is how can you give everybody a chance to have success on the front end? And this is the model that we've come up with so far. And that's where everybody starts 25 yards away from the hole, from the center of the green typically. They play all 9 holes and they try to shoot 36 or better. So the total 9-hole yardage is 225 yards. That's what you see in the bottom right. And then once they shoot 36 or better, they would move back to Division 2, 50 yards, and they would continue this process all the way up if they wanted to what we have, which is Division 10, potentially the back tees at your facility are over 3,200 yards. Now, students don't do this in their first attempt, right? Like you don't have a student typically go through each yardage in one attempt. So what we try to do is we try to motivate them along the way to take the small steps to see improvement and then end up at their goal, which might be shooting 36 or better. So we are huge supporters of trying to get one stroke better. So if somebody goes out and they shoot a 50 from 25 yards away, the goal next time is to potentially try to shoot a 49. And we just try to continue to move them forward one stroke at a time. And it's interesting when you ask these students when they get done and they shot a 48, let's say from 25 yards away, and let's say it was Matt was playing, you just say, Matt, what do you think you could do better next time to get one stroke better? And it's interesting to hear their mind and watch them think and go, you know what, I could have putted a little bit better. I'm going to go practice my putting. And it makes them curious as to what they need to work on to improve. And then it also makes your classes more engaging. So maybe an example, Matt, if somebody knew that they needed to work on putting, how would it make the class potentially more engaging for the coach and the peers in the class?
Yeah, so as you go through it, you think about those class games that you're playing. I remember we did a bunch of games and classes. We did that for 3 years before we lost half of our golfers. And when it comes back down to it, when we started that playing format built in and they saw the big picture of why they're even coming to class every day, that's when everything kind of the dots connected, right? And that's where it started up that long-term, okay, I see where I'm heading now. It's like you wouldn't put a bunch of kids in school and there was no curriculum and there was no graduation at the end of the day. It was kind of the similar thing, right? If there's no graduation at the end of the day, why am I even here to begin with, right? And it can be fun for a little bit, but at some point the fun runs out if there's no long-term engagement. So if that helps answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, at some point we've got to cross that bridge from extrinsic to intrinsic. And what a great sport, the game of golf, to be intrinsically motivated to try to improve. But how do you get them to that point if they don't really know what they're doing? So this has been a super helpful, this format, for not only our students, our coaches, and our parents, for everybody to understand what they're working towards. And then it's basically a problem solving exercise. How do you continue to get better? And it's pretty cool to see some of the coaches and the students on what they do to figure out how to get better. One of the biggest questions we always get with beginner golfers is pace of play. Just finally touch on that. We have seen beginner golfers, for the most part, from 25 yards away, be able to finish 9 holes in an hour and a half or less. So from a pace of play standpoint, if you have a busy golf course, a lot of times these folks are pushing play versus slowing down play as beginner golfers. And that's a great feeling, because as a beginner golfer, one of the most traumatizing experiences is somebody behind you with their hands on their waist, stressed out, wondering why you haven't hit your shot yet. So we've alleviated a little bit of that. Now a little bit into the technology and helping students do the actions that they need to do to improve. So within the mobile app, we give points to the students when they play golf. So they get 50 points. You can see on that second screen from the left, there's a GPS in the app as well. So when students get to their yardage, they can drop their ball and play. You don't need to have 10 different tee boxes that you install at your facility. You can use the GPS in the mobile app to help with that. If they practice or they train their skills, they get 25 points. And then if they use the video learning in the curriculum to see where they are and learn some of their skills, they get 25 points for that as well. And what we're trying to do, as we go to the next slide, is create a community at your facility that feels like a team. And it's really cool to see this happen. On the left is the Academy display, and it ranks the students. It also does this in the mobile app, based on the number of points that they earn, and it's added up into their facility, and they can see where they rank. So for example, the screen on the left, it looks like Greensboro Country Club is in first place with 4,350 points. Chapel Hill is in second place. And at some of our facilities, that picture on the right, they actually have a flat screen TV where they display this in the pro shop, and it's really cool. We have one here at our home facility. The students walk in, they look over at the flat screen TV, they see where they rank, and it motivates them to want to play and practice. And more importantly, it motivates them to grab their friends to want to go out and play and practice. And you start to create this really cool community feel at your facility where everybody's working together to try to improve your rank against the other 500 and so courses around the world. It's a really cool feel.
And it's also just showcasing that there's others around the world doing this, that it's not just, hey, you're going out. And when folks ask, what are you, one of the largest things that, when you join the Op36 program, the benefits you get is that you're getting believability in the program, right? Like there's a lot of other folks that are doing this, that are going through the same process, and it's like this large community of folks working together on their game, not competing against others, right? Which is the next step in their journey to join a local tour or to, join a junior league team where you're on a team, but it's a good next step is PGA Junior League and then go to a local tour. So it's kind of that individual, yet it's still team-based. It's a lot of fun. And then, yeah, I think it's just in lieu of time, Ryan, I think, just a couple more slides left, but like going through, just that all the data is being tracked and comes back to the player's profile. And that is also, not only to show your facility impact at the end of the day, but showing player improvement and seeing progress and motivation, because people forget where they start. And this is just a little screen of that. And then just to finish up, Ryan, this is actually the junior development tracks that we built into the app itself that kind of brings that long-term model to life that we talked about on the front end, right? And this is one of your players in your program, I believe, isn't it?
It is one of our home facility. So we've taken those tracks that Matt talked about at the beginning where the player chooses. The player has the choice, as always, to choose their goal. And when they're really young, they might not have a goal, right? But at some point, they're going to choose a goal potentially. And what this junior development model allows them to do is pick where they want to be, potentially when they graduate high school. So on the left side, you see the different tracks. For this particular student, Caden Gray, he's 15 years old. He has verbalized and told us multiple times that he wants to play in college. Now, this is the type of player that you sometimes get at your facility that might be a little bit behind on their scores and their playing. And you really need to have potentially something to show them to motivate them to work harder, work a little bit smarter, maybe be a little bit more dedicated to tournaments and playing, to catch back up on pace. So he's 15 based on our data. He's 1 year behind pace based on where he is on the golf course. And it's pretty motivating when you show a player like this their track and their graph, and immediately the next day, the next week, the next month, they are working harder than they ever have. It's just objective data that they can see, and it really helps them and their parents understand what level of effort, where they need to be at certain parts of the journey. It's also super helpful when somebody's ahead of pace and the parent, it might be a little bit too involved in saying, hey, why aren't they improving at a faster rate? No, they're doing fantastic. They're 2 years ahead of pace. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. So this is a great tool for a coach to use with parents and the players to motivate them. And as we do this more and more, Matt, and we get more data, we'll continually adjust this. But for right now, this is a really cool, accurate tool to use to help parents, coaches, and players.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think, Josh, thank you in the Southern California section. Thank you for having us. I know we just like flew through a lot in such a little time. I like the short time format. And if any coaches, I'd love to open it up for Q&A, but if any coaches, want to actually see the structure of the program, we have a bunch of free courses from partner courses and everything in our new Op36 portal that any coach can go make an account and take our developmental programming course and actually see how we set it up to see if it might be a fit at their club. And there's a bunch of other ones too, like that are built in there that they can check out. So.
Guys, real quick, I just wanted to, just weigh in here. First of all, brilliant. Really, really appreciate the information. It's tremendous. And I know I can't remember what it was, Matt. I think I saw you 7 or 8 years ago at one of these kinds of things. I was sitting in an audience somewhere and just to see how far the program has come and how it's evolved and how it's developed and how it's, how you've gone tech and how you've been able to really offer it in meaningful ways so people could use what you do better. I appreciate how long it takes me to go small steps sometimes. It's wonderful to see that the progression. So I just wanted to acknowledge that first and foremost. And I also think you guys have it right on the head. And I think it's a good thing for us to kind of take note from. I played basketball growing up, and it would have been if you had given me a regular sized basketball and a regular sized basketball hoop, I might have thought that the goal of basketball was never to even, just hit the net at the bottom. You just physically couldn't do it. It seems so natural and logical if we're going to get players playing the game, if we're starting them from a comfort level and challenging them to move backwards, that it's a success-driven model. And I work with, I've got one student who I won't say his name just in case he's out there and on this, but his name is Giles. And he's a member at a country club. I've been begging him quite literally to stop playing from the blue tees when he only drives the ball 215 yards. And golf to him is driver, fairway wood, hybrid, wedge, and that's just sort of kind of how he thinks of the game. And so I finally did convince him to actually play a round of golf from tees that would have been a typical PGA Tour, hit a driver, hit a 9-iron, whatever it was. And it was eye-opening to him how much more fun the game of golf was to actually be able to do what he watches on TV every single time through the course. So a challenge. I know that there's a machismo to some degree, maybe for some of the older players, but brilliant in that the structure allows people to be successful and move backward. And I love it.
Hey, real quick, Matt and Ryan, we had a question from a viewer who lives in Canada. Is your program available outside of the United States? And one more thing, pricing was asked. I assume people can find pricing options on the website. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do offer outside. And if you're interested in running the program, there's multiple options now. There used to just be one option. You had to stick to it, but we understand seasonality. We understand that everyone needs like a full program. So if you're interested, I would highly recommend just reaching out to the team. And the easiest way to do it is just go to operation36.golf/coaches. And if you make a free account there, there's a spot as soon as you sign up, or you can reach out and schedule a call, and they'll build a program for you. Like they'll show you how it needs to work. And see if it will fit at your club, because it isn't a fit at every golf club, right? And then they'll show you the projections, everything. And then after that, you can say, yeah, let me take this PDF, go back to my club, see if this would work. And if it's a fit, then right from there, all that happens is we actually build out all the marketing materials for you. You get a PGA program advisor on our team that's a golf pro that's run the program, and they onboard you and get you set up, and you're rocking and rolling, getting your first 12 students. So that's definitely been streamlined over the last year, especially with COVID, and we've gotten a lot better there. But to answer that question, yeah, we're actually in 12 countries now that use the program. So it's grown quite a bit. More than that, Ryan?
We are 15th country 2 weeks ago,
15. All right.
which is
All
crazy.
right.
Crazy to think. Crazy to think. As long as somebody speaks English, we're good.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, changing everything to a different language is certainly challenging. But the question from Canada, absolutely, we've got a handful of coaches that do really, really well up in Canada. As Matt mentioned, from a pricing standpoint, we understand seasonality. So you might not have a 12-month agreement. If you live in Canada, you might go for something a little bit shorter, 4 or 5 months, but we certainly have that available.
Guys, awesome. Really, really appreciate it. And again, yeah, if folks, if you have questions beyond this, obviously this presentation is going to be saved. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you to reach back to Op36 and follow back up to find out how you can get this program at your facilities. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Josh.
And thank you for inviting us. This is fantastic.
Can't wait for the next opportunity to connect.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.